So vote once, vote twice for Bill McKay, you middle-class honkies. Good morning, everyone. This is Stone Gasman, live from New York City. And this morning we are going to be doing a commentary for The Candidate, directed by Michael Ritchie and starring Robert Redford. And I had never seen this before. I honestly... we're going to talk about, a lot of this conversation is, of course, going to get into politics eventually, because normally I'm rather apolitical, and I don't want to talk about politics, usually unless I'm doing a political movie. Well, this is a political movie, so stand by, because things are about to get a little incendiary. So I always knew that this film existed. I always knew that there was a political film from 1972 called The Candidate. What I didn't know up until now was that this actually won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. And in fact, the screenwriter actually appears on the film. So it's very, very interesting, little verisimilitude there, I think. Very interesting how that works out. But usually I think a lot of times in these situations is that, when they... usually when a director wants a writer to be on the set, because usually they bar writers from the sets, usually if you fly them up and give them a part, then things will be copacetic, because then they could be on set the entire time. And evidently the screenwriter is almost in every scene of this movie. Okay, we'll point them out when we get to them. But anyway, we are paused at the Warner Brothers logo. I'm going to get rid of the volume here. And I'm not expecting a huge turnout tonight, but at the same time, let's go ahead and get started. So on the count of three, we're on the Warner Brothers logo for The Candidate. 3, 2, 1, and play. And this is actually the modern Warner Brothers logo that I'm looking at, Time Warner Entertainment. I think this was probably like the VHS or DVD re-release that was in the 90s. I'm willing to say. Now, I really like these titles, and we're going to see more of the title sequence later with, how the names come under the red, white, and blue stars and that kind of thing. And here we open up on a political hall where everybody's about to chant, we want Neil, we want they're asking to see another politician in this. And one thing I found fascinating about this movie was, of course, how the media was utilized in terms of getting the message out there to voters and everything. And here we have Mike Wallace, very famous for 60 Minutes. And there's actually a lot of familiar faces in this movie. I mean, if you are familiar with a lot of the media figures at the time, you will see a lot of them. And but this gentleman here with the, well, I'll have to wait now, but so, but the first gentleman that we saw, who's coming around here on the left side, that is an actor by the name of Alan Garfield. And here again, there's a lot of people in this movie. I wasn't able to recognize every one of them. And I want to propose a challenge before we get to the title sequence, because from what I understand, here's Alan Garfield right here. From what I understand, this was evidently Groucho Marx's last movie, but he doesn't have any dialogue. He's basically just a walk-on. He just basically has a walk-on part. Now, I have scanned this movie. I have looked online. I can't say definitively if Groucho Marx is in this movie, but there's certainly a couple of individuals that could certainly pass for him. But according to some sources, this is Groucho's last movie. And of course, we will, see cameos by other famous people. Now, the gentleman here with the beard, this is, of course, Peter Boyle. Yeah, I got the golf clubs in the trunk. God. Okay, can I just throw this out there first off? Because every time I hear, people talk about golf clubs and everything, it makes me think of Falling Down. When Michael Douglas is going on his rampage over LA and everything, and he just, he decides to just walk through the golf course. Now, you want to talk about a waste of land. I don't give a damn about these, high-powered businessmen who, they make their deals on the goddamn golf course. I mean, it's a waste of land. It's ridiculous that people think they can get away with just, having all this land to themselves and hitting a stupid little ball around. But I mean, like Michael Douglas in Falling Down said, they should have a goddamn petting zoo. Instead. But I just want to throw that out there real quick because I have a very, very negative attitude on golf courses and clubs and everything. But here we have Peter Boyle giving Andrew Garfield this notice on Governor John J. McKay, played by Melvin Douglas on the left there, and his son is basically being picked as the Democrat to run against the Republican incumbent. And tell me something else I don't know. Peter Boyle is actually a delight in this movie. He's actually one of the best things about it. But this is in more ways than one, a Robert Redford film. Definitely a Robert Redford movie. The Candidate. And, Robert Redford, when he was in his acting heyday, was a little bit before my time. So was Peter Boyle, for that matter. But, the truth of the matter is that I watched Young Frankenstein like 1,000 times, where he, of course, played the monster in that. And with Robert Redford's films, I mean, I saw Butch Cassidy, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and that's about it. I mean, I never saw Jeremiah Johnson. I never saw The Electric Horseman. I never saw any of these Robert Redford movies. As a matter of fact, the first Robert Redford movie I can definitively say I've seen was probably Ordinary People. And he stayed behind the camera and directed that for the most part. And, of course, I find it hilarious that a lot of Scorsese fans are still complaining after all this time about Redford winning the Oscar over Martin Scorsese. Well, look, all I'm saying is Redford got the DGA award that year. Okay, so look, his fellow directors said, yeah, Robert Redford. They didn't say Martin Scorsese. They said Redford. And like I said, he made a movie that is, not only emotionally powerful, but it also has the potential to save people's lives. While Raging Bull, to be perfectly honest, is just about an asshole who just likes to punch people at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, why people still are on the Raging Bullshit bandwagon, I have no idea. But written by Jeremy Lorner, and like I said, he won the Academy Award for writing the original screenplay, and directed by Michael Ritchie. And we will talk about those gentlemen in due time. But here we are introduced to Robert Redford in literally the very first scene after the credits. And the story begins as he's approached by Peter Boyle. Bill McKay? I thought a beard was taboo in politics. It is. And when he said that, I was like, automatically, I love the Peter Boyle character. Automatically, I love him. Yeah. I don't know. Is that still true nowadays? I mean, is a beard really that, that taboo in politics? I mean, like, who cares? I mean, seriously. I mean, one of my favorite stories in Hollywood history is when Michael Douglas was producing The China Syndrome. And he played this rebel cameraman who didn't play by the rules. And he had a beard. And, when Columbia decided to go ahead and release it, the head of the studio sent Michael Douglas a little package before shooting started, which was basically an electric razor. And he's basically like, you know what to do with this. And, Douglas is like, what? And he didn't bother shaving his beard. Now, there's an attitude here which completely reflects my attitude when it comes to not only politics, but also the American political system in general. The gentleman that is sitting behind Peter Boyle here, and, Redford says, I watched my dad do 20 years of this. And his dad is played by Melvin Douglas. We'll talk about him later when we meet him. But I love what this actor, this, bit part, he says, right behind Peter, this stuff you call politics is bullshit. My man. Because that's not all it is. It's bullshit. I mean, it's all about just people making money. People not giving a shit about the constituents. They only give a shit about their donors. Now, but interestingly enough, this was about maybe 6 years before the landmark Supreme Court case in 1978, which basically gave more power to the corporations. And then slowly but surely over the past 40 years, corporations have basically taken over the country. They bought every politician. In fact, they bought every office now that they were now resorting to going to like school election boards, to spread their propaganda bullshit that they do every day on mainstream news. But yeah, so this was a few years before that happened, where back then I think I probably would have given a shit more about politics and everything. But Peter Boyle and Robert Redford are going to have a little conversation here about becoming the new Democratic candidate and going up against the Republican politician that has already been in office for maybe a good 8-10 years, something like that. I mean, they're going to say again how long he's been in office, but the wife right here, the actress who plays Robert Redford's wife in this, her name is Karen Carlson, who plays Nancy McKay. She's 77 years old, American actress, born in Louisiana. She started her career in Bob Hope and Phyllis Diller variety shows, Laugh-In and the Hollywood Palace. And the first film that she was in was a 1969 film called Shame, Shame, Everybody Knows Her Name. And then she was in The Student Nurses, which was in a series of nurse pictures produced by Roger Corman that were rather heavily dipped into TNA and that kind of thing. And at one point, she was actually married to David Soul, who played Hutch on Starsky and Hutch. And she also did episodes of Mannix and the Streets of San Francisco. Starsky and Hutch, she was actually in a couple of episodes of that. That's how she met David Soul. And then she did a couple of other movies, nothing really big, but she was in Black Oak Conspiracy. She was in a movie called Matilda about a boxing kangaroo. Also, The Octagon. She was in the Chuck Norris movie, The Octagon. She was in an episode of Heart to Heart. And then she did 12 episodes in the Heat of the Night in 1990 as attorney Sarah Halsey. And she hasn't really done much else. I mean, that's about it. You're not going to bring my father into this. And so Robert Redford plays basically an idealist. He's a lawyer, and he's kind of pushed into this thing, not necessarily against his better judgment, but he does have reservations. Will this be all worth it, even though I'm set to lose? I mean, the idea, of course, that he doesn't have a chance against the Republican incumbent, that he doesn't have a chance. And if I'm screwing up the terms, like political terms, like incumbent or anything, I don't see. That's the thing. I'm wondering at one point in this commentary, should I give my background into politics? But see, we'll get to that later. But I mean, here he gives him a matchbook that says, you're going to lose. That's it. That's the way this game is going to be played. You're free, McKay. You don't have a chance, so say what you want. You can say whatever the hell you want. Just remember that you're going to lose. The question is whether you can put your ass on the line. Yeah. Peter Boyle is really, really good in this movie. Thanks for the beer. And here we have the actual senator, Crocker Jarman. I like that name, actually. Crocker Jarman. It's a very interesting name. And he's played by an actor named Don Porter, born in 1912, passed in 1997 at the age of 84. And best known for playing Peter Sands, the boss of Ann Sothern's character on Private Secretary. And also as Russell Lawrence, the widowed father of 15-year-old Frances Gidget Lawrence in the 1965 ABC sitcom Gidget, which of course had Sally Field in it. And Sally Field just celebrated her birthday, and we'll be doing an audio commentary on a movie with Sally Field on Saturday night called Heroes with Henry Winkler and Harrison Ford. And if you've never seen that before, this will be an ideal way to check that out. Now, here's Robert Redford going through the crowd here, listening to Crocker Jarman. It's a Crocker Jarman. And here we have our first of three possibilities for Groucho Marx, unless it's a lookalike. But there's going to be a gentleman coming into frame here very soon that has, a quasi resemblance to the legendary comedian. It's not the guy in the hat next to Redford, obviously. But yeah, apparently he's supposed to be a walk-on somewhere in this movie. I mean, and his last credited movie was actually in 1968, which was called Skidoo, directed by Otto Preminger, which is, from what I understand, has a completely negative reputation. And see, this is going to be first of several handshakes between Crocker Jarman and Bill McKay, played by Robert Redford. He's an ugly little cuss. There is a generous amount of light satire percolating all throughout this movie. I think it could have been a little harsher. I actually do think that they could have gone a little further with the satire. But, the thing is that The Candidate, and it doesn't have many faults, I think. I think it's actually a really good movie. But it gives a fairly compelling insight into the political process, at least circa 1972. And, let me go ahead and say hi to people in the chat real quick. Peter Boyle was in another politically oriented movie a couple years before this called Joe. Yes. Directed by John G. Avildsen. Worth checking out. Yeah, definitely. That movie, that was also, I believe that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was released by Canon Films. And this was long before Golan and Globus took over the company. But I believe that Joe was one of the very first Canon movies. Crocker Jarman drinking game. Yeah. Every time Crocker Jarman says economy, go ahead and take a shot. But what's your platform? And he honestly has no clue. He is really a very green candidate here. He really is completely unprepared for these questions. And, but he, because of the fact he's resigned to basically saying whatever he wants, well, basically he's going to come off like the idealist, for this office. Okay, now Alan Garfield. Okay, we were going to talk about Alan Garfield here, who plays Harold Klein. Born in 1939 and just passed away 2 years ago in 2020 at the age of 80 years old. He's appeared in over 100 films, known for having played nervous villains, corrupt businessmen, and, of course, politicians. In addition, he appeared in 2 art films by German director Wim Wenders, De Stande Ding and Bisson in de Welt. Quentin Tarantino studied with Garfield at the beginning of his career as an actor. Garfield's lead roles included the 1971 film Cry Uncle, the 1978 film Skateboard with Leif Garrett, and the 1982 film Get Crazy. And he also appeared in the Tales from the Dark Side episode The Deal in 1988. And, oh my God. Well, I might as well read this. When Garfield suffered a stroke before filming his role in The Ninth Gate, director Roman Polanski opted to use Garfield's paralyzed face for his character rather than conceal it or recast the role. Garfield suffered another massive stroke in 2004 and thereafter was a long-term nursing care resident at the Motion Picture Home. And he very sadly died of COVID-19. Yeah, he died of COVID-19 in April 2020. But his first film was in 1968. He was in Orgy Girls 69. Yeah, that was his film debut, in Orgy Girls 69. But more importantly, he had some roles in some very early Brian De Palma movies. He was in Greetings, where he played a smut peddler, probably boasting Orgy Girls 69 in the process. And he was also in Hi Mom, which is a great great Brian De Palma comedy from 1970 with Robert De Niro. But before The Candidate, he did a good number of movies. I mean, he did The Owl and the Pussycat. He was a dress shop proprietor in that. He also did Taking Off. He was in Bananas as the man on the cross. You've got to walk it like you talk it, or you'll lose that beat. And he was also in The Organization, which is one of the They Call Me Mr. Tibbs movies, sequel to In the Heat of the Night. In 1972, he was also in Top of the Heap and Get to Know Your Rabbit. And then later on, he was in Slither, The Conversation, The Front Page, 1974. He was in the 1976 film Gable and Lombard, directed by Sidney J. Furie, where he played Louis B. Mayer. And then he was also in The Brinks Job, The Stuntman, One from the Heart, Continental Divide, The Black Stallion Returns, Teachers, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Night Visitor, Matlock, Until the End of the World, The Patriots, Stewart Saves His Family, Destiny Turns on the Radio, which I believe Quentin Tarantino actually wrote the story to that. And then he also did an episode of The West Wing. He was also in The Majestic with Jim Carrey, very, very underrated movie, written and directed by Frank Darabont, who did Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. And so here we have Redford, meeting, these workers at a plant, reaching out to them and again talking to them and letting them know that he wants to look out for the citizens of California and what they need to do and, get their paychecks faster, that kind of thing. Yeah, they think if you're in a union, oh, you've got it made. Yeah. Yeah, too bad, there's no more unions left in the country. This is, here again, different time, very different time. This was 50 years ago in 1972 when Richard Nixon was basically the Republican candidate going for his second term. And I forget the... his challenger, his Democratic challenger was, of course, George McGovern. And he was, of course, very, very much against the Vietnam War, which Nixon was basically, keeping on going with that because the military-industrial complex was making a shit ton of money. And he didn't want that to stop. And so Nixon ended up winning by a landslide, basically. But then, of course, he ended up resigning after the Watergate scandal in a couple of years. So, and a lot of people don't look back on Nixon very, very fondly. Despite his, his interactions with China and everything. And, I remember I met somebody, I think that they were, Democrat, in terms of voting and everything. But he said that, Republican Party aside, Nixon was, I think, the most disappointing president in U.S. history, and I can see what he definitely means by that. But glad that was before my time. And of course, Ford would give him a pardon, after all that crap, just a few years later. But Alan Garfield filmed scenes for Tarantino's would-be first film, My Best Friend's Birthday, in 1987. Oh, wow. Interesting. Now, here we are at the Riviera Hotel, where we're going to listen to the very first speech by Robert Redford. Here he is arriving with his wife and everything, and here's Peter Boyle coming on in to basically monitor everything and make sure everything is straight. The the guy at the microphone that we're going to see coming up here when we enter the ballroom, and who introduces um, Robert Redford with a series of rather pathetic jokes. Excuse me. But the MC in the ballroom that's going to be introducing Robert Redford is actually, you may recognize him with from One Day at a Time. And this actor is by the name of Pat Harrington Jr. There he is going up to the microphone right now, and we'll see him here in a minute. Yep, getting some pictures and everything. Why is he not even on the list here? Huh. Okay. I don't know why he's not listed there, but one moment. So yeah, here is Pat Harrington Jr. Without a mustache, sans stash, but he's best known as building superintendent Dwayne Schneider on the sitcom One Day at a Time, but he doesn't have his famous mustache. Well, actually, of course, this was years before One Day at a Time. I mean, One Day at a Time didn't move until 75. So it was actually another 3 years. But his father, Senior, was a song and dance man who worked in vaudeville, performed on the Broadway stage, and he attended a Catholic military school in New York. Following in his father's footsteps, he pursued a career in entertainment after graduating from college and completing military service. He took a job at NBC in New York City. Every time, okay, this is the truth. Every time I see NBC, I always think of, Howard Stern in Private Parts. No, it's WNBC. Anyway, he then began acting on stage and toured North America with a number of plays, eventually performing on Broadway. He became known in the 1950s as a member of Steve Allen's television troupe, The Men on the Street, which included Don Knotts and Tom Poston and Louis Nye. In the 64-65 television season, he guest starred on numerous programs, including The Bing Crosby Show and Kentucky Jones. In a 1965 episode of Man from U.N.C.L.E., Harrington reprised his role as Guido Panzini, who he also played in the February 1966 episode of McHale's Navy, McHale's Country Club Caper. And in 1967, he appeared in the Elvis Presley film Easy Come, Easy Go. He also parodied Get Smart in an episode of F Troop, in which he played secret agent B. Wise. From 71 to 74, he appeared in 11 episodes as District Attorney Charlie Gianetta of the ABC legal drama Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law, starring Arthur Hill in the title role. And he worked as a voice actor, doing Ray Palmer, Adam and Roy Harper, and Speedy on the Superman Aquaman Hour Adventure in 1967. In 1974, he appeared with Peter Falk and Robert Conrad in the Columbo episode An Exercise in Fatality. And he twice appeared on former co-star Valerie Bertinelli's television shows. In 1990, he appeared on Sydney, and in 2012, he appeared in his final acting role in Hot in Cleveland. And he was also the voice of the inspector and his sidekick Doo-Doo in the cartoons that accompanied the Pink Panther in the 60s and 70s. He died of Alzheimer's disease in 2015 or 2016, age 86. And aside from The Candidate, he wasn't in many other actual movies. I mean, he did The President's Analyst, and he was actually in The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, the Disney film with Kurt Russell. And he also played Willie Shakespeare in the 1972 film Every Little Crook and Nanny, written and directed by Cy Howard and released by Metro Goldwyn Mayer that same year. So, of course, Redford is going to be the target of numerous female admirers. It seems like I wouldn't be surprised if half of American women at the time were in love with Redford just because he had that, he had that classic movie star look, like with Clark Gable and, Henry Fonda and other actors. He just, it just seems like he was born to play, roles on the screen. But it is pretty amazing up until now, like how many of his 70s movies I just haven't bothered with. Okay, the gentleman in the middle who is talking underneath Peter Boyle, that is, in fact, the screenwriter. That is, in fact, Jeremy Larner. Now, we need to talk about Jeremy Larner now for a while, and there he is right there wearing the glasses, and this is a gag writer situation. So he was born in 1937, still with us. He is still alive. Author, poet, journalist, and speechwriter. He was born in New York, grew up in Indianapolis, winning his high school tennis championship in 1954. He graduated from Brandeis University in 1958, where he was close to Herbert McHugh, serving Hal, Philip Robb, and a fellow student named Abby Hoffman, who, of course, became a very, very famous activist in later years. In fact, Born on the 4th of July, the movie that with Tom Cruise, directed by Oliver Stone, it's actually dedicated to Abby Hoffman. In 1959, Jeremy Larner began a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship at UC Berkeley. Finding himself unsuited for academic life, he left graduate school his first year and came to New York City at the age of 22. He stayed there throughout the 60s, writing 5 books in that period. He was assigned by Dissent magazine to cover the teachers' strike and spent several months going to elementary school classes in Harlem in 1962. His long account of what he discovered was widely anthologized, having come to the attention of Michael Harrington, author of The Other America, Poverty in the United States, which inspired John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. Larner's first published piece was a critique of J.D. Salinger, published in Partisan Review in 1961. Also in that year, he journeyed south to cover the lunch counter sit-in strikes organized at Black universities and wrote several pieces for the New Leader and Dissent. In 1963, he had edited a taped collection of interviews with heroin addicts at the Henry Street Settlement in New York. The harrowing stories told in these interviews became the basis of one of the first books from tape, The Addict in the Street, which remained in print for 20 years. His first novel, Drive, he said, won the Delta Prize for First Novels in 1964. The prize had gone unclaimed for several years and by then had reached $10,000. The judges were Walter Van Tilburg Clark, Mary McCarthy, and Leslie Fielder. For the title of this novel, Larner chose a line from the poem I Know a Man by Robert Creeley. The heroes of Drive, he said, were a college basketball star who has mixed feelings about his stardom and what is expected of him and his revolutionary roommate, who eventually burns the campus down. The reviewer in Playboy magazine echoed the establishment verdict when he said, "Nothing like this could ever happen in America." Larner won the Aga Khan Prize from the Paris Review for the best short story of the year of 1964, Oh, the Wonder. After 1964, he worked as a freelance journalist and published articles, essays, stories in many magazines, including The Harper's, Paris Review, and Life. Larner reported on the trial of Dale Noyd, a decorated fighter pilot who had refused to train other pilots for the war in Vietnam. The account, which ran in Harper's magazine, was selected from an anthology of the best journalism of the year. Now, we'll talk more about Jeremy Larner a little bit later. But, I mean, when I realized that this script won the Academy Award, of course, when I first watched it, I paid attention to the actual, the dialogue and the staging and everything. And it's a really good script. I mean, it really does showcase what a typical presidential campaign in 1972 was all about. And, what if, even though, he's supposed to be set up to lose, but what if he had the ability to say whatever the hell he wanted to? And I got to say that before I saw The Candidate, the political movie, which is probably my all-time favorite, is probably Bulworth, written, produced, and directed by Warren Beatty, where he plays a Democratic senator quote unquote seeking reelection. He's not really seeking reelection, but instead he wants to kill himself because he realizes how politically fucked we are as a country. And so he hires a hitman to basically kill him over the course of some weekend. And we see a lot of scenes where he's running because he doesn't know where the guy's going to be, and he's his entire staff is running up to him like wondering what the hell is wrong with this guy. And he starts telling the truth, but he does so via rapping. So he goes to a black church in LA, and somebody, and then there's like, are you saying that the Democrats don't care about the African American Party? Isn't it obvious? I mean, until you put down your malt liquor and chicken wings and get behind somebody other than a running back who stabs his wife, you're never going to get anything out of me. So, the argument is like, well, you've completely ignored us. Well, you didn't really contribute any money to my campaign, did you? And here Robert Redford's going to play a little basketball. But yeah, Bulworth, I saw Bulworth twice in the theater, and hell of a great political satire where obviously you might cringe at the idea of Warren Beatty like macking on a very young Halle Berry. I think she was only like 23 at the time, an absolute knockout regardless. And he basically flirts with Halle Berry and raps throughout the whole movie, and it is awesome. But okay, so I'm going to talk about the rest of the actors later. And but as this whole political process, comes out, he's going around, he's meeting everybody, he's shaking hands, not kissing babies. I think that used to be like a thing in the 50s and 60s. I think they made fun of that in a Batman episode, where Batman refuses to kiss a baby just because, of germs and everything, and Penguin's like, oh, I'll just kiss the baby, and of course the baby bites his nose off. But yeah, here he is on the trail, on this political trail and everything. Look, I grew up in a household where my mother was a full-fledged Republican and my father was a full-fledged Democrat. And let me just say that whenever they had an argument, it was always over fucking politics. It was always over politics. And it was the one time where I just, couldn't stand being around them when they had these bullshit political arguments. And I remember when like Bill Clinton won the presidency back in 1992, and my father was just like, happy days are here again. And then my mother was like, oh, fuck you. See, that's the thing. It's like, okay, so in politics, everybody hates everybody. Basically, everybody disagrees with everybody. Everybody argues, and it's like, what's the point then? And here's Natalie Wood, the gorgeous Natalie Wood, who this is 1972, so she would be alive for only another 9 years. And it's interesting, just in the past few years, they've reopened that case in terms of Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. And I did a commentary earlier in the year for Brainstorm, which is a 1983 film with Christopher Walken, which was basically a tribute to Douglas Trumbull. I did it as a double commentary with what is it? Silent Running from 1972. And during the Brainstorm commentary, the writer of Brainstorm is absolutely convinced that Natalie Wood and Christopher Walken were having an affair, so much that he actually caught them in the dressing rooms, basically fucking like rabbits. Although the director himself, Douglas Trumbull, never saw anything. Now, there's a guy underneath the balloons that you see, right? A second. That is Groucho Marx possibility number one. Like I said, I scanned this movie from top to bottom, and I can't definitively say that Groucho Marx is in this movie. I just can't. For all intents and purposes, I think his last movie was Skidoo. But that was part of the fun of watching this movie, is to look for Groucho Marx. But that might have been him. Might have been him under the balloons. But there's another scene later. Excuse me. There's another scene later where he might actually appear. And we're coming up on 38 minutes here. 38 minutes. So going back to my experiences in politics, because my father, my parents would squabble all the time when it comes to political discourse and everything. And on top of all that, I grew up in an organization called Children of the American Revolution, which is basically the offspring of Daughters of the American Revolution. And we would meet in hotels and smoke weed and get drunk. No, I'm just kidding. No. Actually, what we did was we had these long, pointless conferences where of course, we'd sit in a room. There'd be like 500 chairs in there, and we would have like state speeches, and then of course there would be elections where people would run for the new offices for like the state or the national level. And here again, and remember, these are all children we're talking about. Okay, these are all, children of the American Revolution. To be a member, you essentially have to be under 21, and you also have to had a ancestor that fought in the Revolutionary War. Well, I had a direct ancestor fight under General Washington's command, so that made me part of the Children of the American Revolution. My mother was in the DAR, her mother was in the DAR. But anyway, the whole thing is that when you went to meet the candidates, which was usually like on a Friday night, you basically go in and you shake the hand of everybody running for office, where you basically just go like in a U shape. You go around these tables, and people would put all these stickers and ribbons on you and everything. Yeah, just vote for me. And of course, the person right next to him is running for the same office. Yeah, vote for me, vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. And I was kind of disillusioned by the whole thing. I just kind of felt, well, okay, so do I vote for the person that will probably do the best at the job, even though I barely understand what the job is in the first place? Or should I vote for somebody because I know them and because, I talked with them before, while the other person has maybe I've never talked to? So, I found these elections just so utterly pointless. I found them so incredibly pointless. And it's just ever since I was a kid, I could never wrap my head around the notion of voting for somebody that first of all, you don't even know. Second, you're probably let alone ever going to meet them. And on top of all that, they're probably going to fuck up in office anyway. So why bother, going into a little booth and pushing a button, for this person that you're never going to meet, probably don't know anything about whatsoever. I've never understood. I have never understood the point of that. And of course, look, there are those who go out and they actually meet people, the common man type of thing. And they do go out of their way to meet potential voters, as Robert Redford is doing all throughout the campaign in this movie. But I don't know. I'm too much of an introvert. And on top of all that, I've only voted twice in my life. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've only voted twice in my life. Had I been old enough to vote in the 1990s, I probably would have voted for Ross Perot, just because I found the guy funny. But looking back on it, I really wish I had voted for Ross Perot, because, like I said, if there's anything I can't stand in politics, it's this two-party system. It's a fucking seesaw. It's the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys. I honestly just don't give a shit. I will never be in any of these places where there's these speeches and crowds and everything. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that at all. I will never, I can't go to these hotels that always have these conference rooms rented out for them so they can, give their speeches and meet people and everything. And that's the same way with primaries too. To me, it would be all a waste of time. And I'm just too much of an introvert. I have PTSD. I can't stand crowds. And on top of all that, I refuse to wait in line to push a button, for somebody that I don't even know, let alone never going to meet. So basically, throughout most of my life, I've been very, very apolitical. And of course, people, get pissed off when I tell them that, because it's like, well, you're not going to, you're not going to participate in the process. Well, I always go by what George Carlin said. I always go by what George Carlin said. Everybody complains about politicians. Everybody says they suck. Well, where do you think these politicians come from? They don't just fall out of the sky. They don't just come through another dimension. No, they come from American schools and American parents and American, churches and all that stuff. But this is the best we can do, folks. It's all our system has to offer. Garbage in, garbage out. If you have selfish, ignorant citizens, then you're going to get selfish, ignorant leaders. Okay. And look, that's all 100% true. And I do believe George Carlin's philosophy that, look, if you vote, you have no right to complain. I know people like to twist that around, well, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? If you vote and you elect dishonest, incompetent people and they get into office and screw everything up, well, you were responsible for what they have done. You caused the problem. You voted them in. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, who did not vote, who did not even leave the house on election day. So, I mean, to me, I have every right to complain. I mean, honestly, I mean, all these people complaining about these corrupt senators and how they're just taking the donor money, not listening to the constituents. Well, so why did you vote for them in the first place? I mean, this country is such an idiocracy. It is such an idiocracy that, they're under the delusion that these politicians are going to change everything for the better. Well, look, they've all been bought off, and corruption is now rampant, in this country. I mean, this country was bought and sold and paid for it a long time ago. Like George Carlin said, I mean, the shit they shuffle around every 4 years doesn't mean a fucking thing. It just, yeah, I mean, I just don't understand the point of actually participating when, here again, I look at all these people as either criminals or scumbags. They're corrupt to the core. They don't give a fuck about the American worker. They just give a fuck about their donors. They just care about the money. Give me, another another school got shot up and everything. Where's my NRA check? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so yeah. Oh yeah, kids are dead. I get my NRA money. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And I know some of you are probably saying, well, look, not every politician is that bad. Well, I don't give a shit enough to actually, learn about them and actually think that they have it. I mean, look, all these politicians, they just want their donor checks. That's all they fucking want. They don't care about anything else. And they certainly don't care about us. They just care about the money. So I've only voted twice in my life. I voted for John Kerry, but then again, I don't think that vote counted because I was overseas in the military, and they called the election even before my vote ever went out there. So again, what was the point? And I did vote for Obama the first time. So, okay, fine. And you want to say, well, you obviously lean Democrat. Oh, no. The Republicans may be fascists, but Democrats let them get away with all this shit. So that's why I'm saying is that, what's the point when the Democrats, they got the same donors, they're all in the same, they're all buddies. They're all friends. They're all part of the elite. They're all part of the big club. And here again, why should I even care about them? I mean, that's the thing. And that's why I completely block politics out of my life 24/7. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not open to watching political movies And that's why I'm saying when The Candidate came up for 1972, I said, you know what? Here's one to do right around election day. This seems like the perfect movie, and I've always heard good things about it, by the way. Now, this is a very early shopping mall. This was actually years before Dawn of the Dead. Like I said, try scanning these crowd scenes for Groucho Marx. But here again, I did not catch him anywhere. Now, let's talk about the director. Let's talk about the director. His name is Michael Ritchie. Okay. Michael Ritchie is probably best known for directing The Bad News Bears in 1976, which is a beloved baseball comedy with Tatum O'Neal and Walter Matthau. He also did a lot of other films with comical or satirical leanings, such as The Candidate and Smile in 1975. He scored commercial successes directing sports films like Down Racer, Bad News Bears, and he also did the Fletch comedies. He directed both Fletch movies with Chevy Chase. The first one is pretty funny. I didn't care for the second one. And then Eddie Murphy's The Golden Child, which might have made a bunch of money in the theater, but I've never been a fan of it personally. But the first movie he directed was Downhill Racer in 1969, also starring Robert Redford, Gene Hackman, and Camilla Sparv. And it's based on the 1963 novel The Downhill Racers by Oakley Hall. And the film is about a talented downhill skier who joins the United States ski team to compete in international skiing competitions. Sylvester Stallone appeared in one scene as an extra in his film debut. Yeah, it wasn't Kitty. It wasn't that porn film he did. It wasn't Kitty at Studs or whatever the hell that's called. That is not Stallone's first movie. But Michael Ritchie also directed another film in 1972, which I thought about doing. It's called Prime Cut. And he also, starring Lee Marvin, who plays a mob enforcer for the Chicago Irish mob, sent to Kansas to collect a debt from a meat packer boss played by Gene Hackman. Again, the picture co-stars Sissy Spacek in her first credited on-screen role as a young orphan being sold into prostitution, as well as Angel Tompkins and Eddie Egan. The film was considered highly risque for its time, based on its violence and the hint of a homosexual relationship between two brothers. Its graphic depiction of female slavery includes a scene depicting naked young women in pens being auctioned like cattle. It is also noted for its depiction of the beef slaughtering process and for a chase scene involving a combine harvester in an open field. So I have been back and forth if I want to do a commentary for Prime Cut, but I don't have it officially scheduled. I'll say that for sure. But Michael Ritchie, he also produced and directed Smile from 1975, about a beauty pageant in Santa Rosa, California, starring Bruce Dern and Barbara Feldon. After that, he did Bad News Bears, huge beloved hit. He also did Semi-Tough, starring Chris Christopherson and Burt Reynolds and Jill Clayburgh. After that, he did the sequel, Bad News Bears Goes to Japan, The Almost Perfect Affair, The Island, 1980. He also directed a concert film starring Bette Midler called Divine Madness. And I will be doing a commentary on Divine Madness on Wednesday, December 1st, because that is, in fact, Bette Midler's birthday. So I will be doing a commentary on that day at 1 a.m. for Michael Ritchie's Divine Madness, starring Bette Midler. He also produced and directed Student Bodies, which was a horror spoof from the early 1980s. And the deal with Student Bodies is that it was, Michael Ritchie was uncredited when he directed that. Actually, the director credit actually went to Mickey Rose, who also wrote the screenplay, and he was a collaborator with Woody Allen. But Student Bodies, Michael Ritchie actually directed it. And it's basically a parody of early slasher movies. And I do think it actually has some very funny moments in it, even though it's always been considered a a dud. But I actually do kind of like it. Now, aside from that, he also directed Wildcats with Goldie Hawn, which is actually fairly funny. I like it better than The Golden Child, which came out the same year. Um, Wildcats, I got to say, I mean, my good buddy John, he loves Goldie Hawn as much as I do. Wildcats has one of the weirdest nude scenes, particularly from Goldie Hawn of all people. It's got one of the weirdest nude scenes in film history. I don't want to give it away. It's very, very bizarre. Michael Ritchie also directed Fletch Lives, 1989. In 1992, he did Diggstown, which was a boxing film with Louis Gossett Jr. and James Woods. And he also directed Cops and Robertsons with Chevy Chase and what was that? Jack Palance? Yeah. That was a dud. He also directed the 1994 film The Scout with Albert Brooks and Brendan Fraser. And I'm very much looking forward to Brendan Fraser's comeback with The Whale, directed by Darren Aronofsky, which is coming soon. And Michael Ritchie's last two films were The Fantastics and A Simple Wish. Yeah. So he only directed about 20 films over the course of his career. Passed away at the age of 62 in 2001. And Chris Willman of Entertainment Weekly wrote, quote, "It's difficult to think of any director ever who had a more consistently uneven career. According to Mark LeFanu, his films were recognized as, quote, unpretentious, closely observed, finely textured works. There comes a point when looking back, one sees that their consistency itself, consistent excellence, is telling us something about the way that cinema itself is able to move out and look around." And he, yeah. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to choose 3 films from Michael Ritchie's catalog, I think I would have to go with The Candidate, Bad News Bears, and then probably Student Bodies, even though there's a lot of films he directed that are actually better than that. I mean, a lot of people would go with Fletch. I mean, Fletch is a pretty funny movie. It's actually one of Chevy Chase's better vehicles, particularly at that time. But, he also, his other sports films like Diggstown, I know, has their fans as well. So, I mean, that's the thing. He's not one of my favorite directors, but, he's, definitely directed his fair share of good sports movies and satires. He also briefly pursued a career as an author, writing Please Stand By, A Prehistory of Television, a nonfiction book about the experimental period of the television industry from the 1920s through the 1940s. Oh, very, very interesting. I actually would be almost down to read that. Oh, he also directed the television movie with the infamous title, The Positively True Adventures of the Alleged Texas Cheerleader Murdering Mom. Yeah, he directed that in 1993. And he also did episodes of The Big Valley, Dr. Kildare, Man from U.N.C.L.E., Bob Hope Presents the Chrysler Theater. And he did 11 episodes of Run for Your Life in the mid-1960s. Bruce Dern is good in Smile. Okay. Downhill Racer is good. The Golden Child is not. I went to a Tom Jones concert in 2007 and Bette Midler was in the audience. Oh, wow. Oh, that must have been interesting. Yeah. And Up All Night with Stone Gasman. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, like I said, I get off work in Manhattan about midnight. And so, I'm able to come home to Brooklyn and do my commentary at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, usually I do 90-minute commentaries at this early in the morning just because, get them out of the way. The Candid, it's 109 minutes. It's a little bit long, but okay, now we are coming up here on... Okay, there's Melvin Douglas. We're going to talk more about Melvin Douglas, but here's the sailboat. Look at the guy in the yellow coat and the yellow hat. Is that Groucho? I know. I'm so hard up on finding Groucho marks in this movie, but like I said, I don't. Oh, maybe that is not him. I don't know. This is actually one of my favorite parts. Here's this woman just, is like, oh, could you sign my chest? Yeah. Have a drink and a hot dog. Boom! I actually did not see that coming when the first time I saw this. Oh. Whew. Okay. So that is Michael Ritchie for you. Let me see. Robert Redford said this film was made as a, quote, labor of love and was shot inexpensively and very quickly. Redford and Ritchie had approached perhaps 10 screenwriters before offering the job to Jeremy Larner, who was under pressure to work quickly so the film would be out in time for the 1972 presidential election campaign. He had a, quote, about a month to write the script and wrote, quote, exactly from noon to 3 a.m. every day. Larner, having worked as a journalist and speechwriter, said his, quote, his experiences with various politicians came into the story. I used some stuff that was directly from the campaigns. He also said that without the help he received from screenwriter Robert Towne of Chinatown fame, he would not have been able to complete the script. The character of McKay is based on U.S. Senator John V. Tooney. And he was an American politician serving the state of California in the 60s and 70s, the son of boxing champion Gene Tooney. And John V. Tooney, he just passed away in 2018 at the age of 83. Director Michael Ritchie worked for Tooney's successful campaign for the 1970 Senate election. Campaign manager Nelson Rising was an associate producer on the film. Rising, who went on to a successful career working in law, property development, and as a civic leader, as well as continuing his work in California politics, was, according to Larner, quote, instrumental in finding political locations in the Bay Area and supplying political volunteers for many of our campaign extras. In the campaign, Tooney's media advisor had, quote, bullseyed the young-old contrast between Tooney and incumbent opponent George Murphy. Ritchie, Redford, and writer Jeremy Larner spent the whole summer of 1971 putting together the script. The scene where McKay is berated in a men's room, we just saw that, is based on an incident that happened to presidential candidate Eugene McCarthy. Larner said that the, quote, the moment when somebody hands McKay a Coke and a hot dog so his hands are preoccupied and then slugs him in the face, that actually happened to McCarthy. The scriptwriter also recounted how he, quote, wrote that character for Redford, obviously, and he told me at one point, I can easily play a character stupider than myself, but I can't be a bad guy. My public wouldn't stand for it. I'm trying to think. I think the only time that Redford has played a bad guy was in one of his worst films, which was Indecent Proposal. Yeah, we all remember that classic, don't we? With Demi Moore and Woody Harrelson, and basically Robert Redford offers this couple $1 million to sleep with Demi Moore, even though it's okay. Like you can get anybody for $1 million, but it has to be Demi Moore, or it has to be just this wife. I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, somebody explained to me later that he probably has some kind of kink, some kind of fetish for like sleeping with other people's wives, but like you're a millionaire, you can get anybody you want, and it's like I don't see what the big deal is about Demi Moore in this movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, beautiful woman, but the movie doesn't make a big deal about her as a character and why Robert Redford would want to sleep with her. Did you like All the President's Men? I do. I do think All the President's Men is terrific, and it's one of the best political films, and definitely up there as one of the best films of the 70s. Looking forward to doing a commentary on that in 4 years. Absolutely. I really admire Ritchie's direction here. The documentary style is effective. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, you really do feel like you are following Robert Redford every step of the way on this political campaign. Now, I love how the office is made up here, where he's you see, how many points and the percentages and everything. They really did a number on this entire room, right? And so here, the Republican senator has just agreed to debate Robert Redford on national television. He's closing in on the polls and all that stuff. Now, this actress here is her name is her character name is Lynn, and this is an actress by the name of Jenny Sullivan. She starred in some TV movies, best known for her reporter Christine Walsh in the 1983 miniseries V and its 1984 sequel V: The Final Battle. She is the daughter of actor Barry Sullivan, and her first feature film was The Angry Breed in 1968. And then after that, she was in Getting Straight, 1970, Plaza Suite, The Other, which is a horror film from 1972, directed by Robert Mulligan. And then she was in The Candidate. But she only did a couple other movies after that. She was in Breakfast in Bed in 1977, and finally Shadow of Doubt in 1998. She also portrayed Barbara in the WNBC comedy series Me and Max, 1980. She's made guest appearances on TV shows including Little House on the Prairie, Dragnet, Adam 12, The FBI, Highway to Heaven, Love American Style, Dan August, Sanford and Son, Ironside, Falcon Crest, LA Law, All in the Family, Canon, Hawaii Five-0, The Waltons, and The Fall Guy. Oh, every time I think of The Fall Guy, I think of Lee Majors' title song. It's one of my favorite, television themes ever. Well, I'm not the guy to kiss and tell, but I've been with Farrah. She also wrote the play J for J, Journals for John, which was prompted after she found a packet of unsent letters in 1995, written by her father's decades earlier to her mentally disabled older brother, Johnny. The play premiered on October 20th, 2001. John Ritter, who in real life had a disabled brother, played Johnny. Oh, Sullivan played herself, and Jeff Kober played her father, Barry. She also taught drama at the University of California at Santa Barbara, and she's still with us. I don't know when she was born, but she is definitely still with us. And yeah, so that's Jenny Sullivan for you. Now, that actor right there that we just saw, that some of these faces I had a little difficulty in identifying, but there's another actor who's been on the campaign trail. His name is Rich Jenkin, and he's played by Quinn Rediker. Now, Quinn Rediker, if that name rings a bell at all, he is actually the co-writer of The Deer Hunter, and he won an Oscar for co-writing The Deer Hunter with Derek Washburn, Louis A. Garfinkel, and Michael Cimino, who also directed The Deer Hunter. And let's talk about Peter Boyle for a while. We have to talk about Peter Boyle. And I think I already did a commentary this year where I went into Peter Boyle's. Oh, no, actually I didn't. Huh. I thought that was another film from 1972 with Peter Boyle. But anyway, so yeah, his first movie was The Group, 1966. He was also in Medium Cool in 1969, a really cool drama film with Robert Forster and Verna Bloom, and directed by Haskell Wexler. And it takes place in Chicago in the summer of 1968, notable for Wexler's use of cinema verite style documentary filmmaking techniques. And it got widespread acclaim from critics, and also got preserved in the Library of Congress. Then he did Joe, which was really his breakout role, which Cliff Booth mentioned earlier. T.R. Baskin, 1971. And then Steelyard Blues, Slither, Kid Blue, Friends of Eddie Coyle. And then he was in Young Frankenstein, where he played the monster. And I think that will always be his most famous role, although he was also in Martin Scorsese's classic Taxi Driver, where he played Wizard. He was also in the Sylvester Stallone film Fist from 1978, Hardcore with George C. Scott, which was the movie about the minister who discovers that his daughter went into the world of hardcore pornography. Mm-hmm. He was also in the sequel Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, 1979, Where the Buffalo Roam with Bill Murray, Outland, that's the one. Yeah, I did a commentary on Outland, written and directed by Peter Hyams, and that was one of the Lad Company commentaries I did. And he's really good in that. He plays opposite Sean Connery as well. Boyle turned down the Hackman role in French Connection. And he was also in Hammett, Yellowbeard, Johnny Dangerously, Turk 182, Red Heat, Speed Zone, The Dream Team, Men of Respect, Kickboxer 2, The Road Back, Malcolm X, Honeymoon in Vegas, The Shadow, The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, While You Were Sleeping, 1995 with Sandra Bullock. And then aside from that, he was in Species 2, Dr. Dolittle, Monsters Ball, The Santa Claus 2, Billy Jester, Santa Claus 3, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. And his last film was 2008's All Roads Lead Home with Peter Coyote and Patton Oswalt. Boyle received his first Emmy nomination for his acclaimed dramatic performance in the 1977 television film Tail Gunner Joe, in which he played Senator Joseph McCarthy. We all, yeah. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And you know what I would have said? Just to meet girls, just to get laid. He was more often cast as a character actor than as a leading man. Taxi Driver, The Brinks Job, and Hardcore, the attorney of gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, Bill Murray, and Where the Buffalo Roam. Apparently, he turned French Connection down because of the audience reaction to his character in Joe. Very interesting. His New York theater work includes playing a comedian who's the object of The Roast, a 1980 Broadway play directed by Carl Reiner. Also in 1980, he co-starred with Tommy Lee Jones in an off-Broadway production of Sam Shepard's acclaimed True West. And 2 years later, Boyle played the head of a dysfunctional family in Joe Pintaro's less well-received Snow Orchid at the Circle Repertory. In 1986, Peter Boyle played the title role of the television series Joe Bash. He's played a character called Joe many, many, many times in his career. Yeah, seriously. In October of 1990, Boyle suffered a near-fatal stroke that rendered him completely speechless and immobile for nearly 6 months. After recovering, he went on to win an Emmy Award in 1996 as Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for his appearance in The X-Files. In the episode Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, he played an insurance salesman who can see selected things in the near future, particularly others' deaths. Boyle also guest starred in 2 episodes as Bill Church Sr. and Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and he also appears in Sony Music's unaired Roger Walters music video, 3 Wishes, as a scruffy genie in a dirty coat and red scarf who tries to tempt waters at a desert diner. And so, okay, so here we are at the 1 hour, 11 minute, and 30 second mark. 1 hour, 11 minutes, 30 seconds. And here we have the debate on television. And one of the topics, it was actually brought up before, was, of course, the topic of abortion. And this, of course, came out a year before the passage of Roe versus Wade, or Roe v. Wade, excuse me, not Roy. Yeah, Roe v. Wade, which, of course, gave women the freedom to have abortion and reproductive rights, basically, which, of course, the Supreme Court yanked away from us just a few months ago. Look, I'm gonna say something that I know there's a lot of people that are gonna hate me for saying this, but here again, when it comes to politics, expect hate from every corner. Exactly. But look, I did my minor in women's studies when I was at college. Long story, but essentially, what I discovered when I took these courses was, oh, so basically, for centuries, it's always been about men controlling women's bodies. That's what it's been all about for centuries. And the thing about the whole topic of abortion, which shouldn't even be a topic, but the thing is, I just think that men, particularly men who are in politics and have the power to change laws, as far as I'm concerned, they need to shut the fuck up when it comes to women's health care. I mean that 200%. Okay. I am sick and goddamn tired of these misogynistic assholes who think that they have some kind of say in what women can do to their bodies. And when it comes to female health care, it's disgusting. It's misogynistic. And in the words of the great George Carlin, again, it's, they're anti-woman. That's all it's about. They're not pro-life. They're anti-woman. They don't want any women to have freedom over their bodies and everything. They just want to be controlled. They just want to control women. That's basically it is. They want to control women's bodies and give them no freedom to do anything whatsoever. And here again, I think that is particularly disgusting. Okay. I think that when it comes to women's health care and especially reproductive rights, only women should be able to have conversations about it. Only women should be able to pass laws regarding that. And like I said, I'm going to say it again. Men need to shut the fuck up. They just need to shut the fuck up. Okay. It's none of our, we got our own issues to worry about. I just don't understand why these men think they can get away with talking about reproductive rights and controlling women's bodies when it's the most misogynistic thing in the world. So I don't understand why this is still a debate, and of course we have these, people out of these churches and these Christian organizations and everything that are just trying to, take over the country with their religious bullshit. And, it pisses me off. It just straight up pisses me off. I know not everybody's going to like me saying that, but look, I'm just being honest here. Okay. I'm being perfectly honest when it comes to the subject of abortion. I think women should have they should be the only ones with the power to not only talk about it, but pass laws about it. I mean, men cannot have children. So thus they just have no idea and they need to shut the fuck up. We haven't discussed race in this country. We haven't discussed poverty. In short, we haven't discussed any of the sicknesses that may yet send this country up in flames. Yep, absolutely. We better get it out in the open. Yeah, when he says that, you think of, like Black Lives Matter. And, of course, now we have a serious poverty crisis in the country. Not only do we have a housing crisis, but we also have extreme poverty, thanks to the 1% and the elite financially raping us on a daily basis. I just don't understand why do people vote for these clowns who are just, destroying everything around us? I don't know. It's just a huge mystery to me. Here's the screenwriter Jeremy Larner again. I had a few more things to say about Michael Larner, excuse me. Had a few more things to say about him. What? Oh, really? Oh, Michael Larner. Oh, yeah, Jeremy Larner. Yes, excuse me. In 1965, Larner began teaching in the English department at Stony Brook State University of New York, although he had no degrees beyond the BA. He taught classes in poetry and in the modern novel from 65 to 69, taking the year off in 68, which he won an NEA grant in the first year they were given to individual artists. He would later teach for 1 year at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. In March of 1968, Larner became a principal speechwriter for Eugene McCarthy in his campaign for president. And Eugene McCarthy was, he was from Minnesota. He served in the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate from 59 to 71. And he sought the Democratic presidential nomination in the 1968 election, challenging incumbent Lyndon B. Johnson on an anti-Vietnam War platform. McCarthy sought the presidency 5 times, but never won. When LBJ, knowing he was about to lose, announced he would not run for re-election, though the California primary at the end of Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, through the convention in Chicago, where the police were rioting in the streets, as Larner wrote and faxed the famous Second Dean speech with Julian Bond gave for McCarthy just in time to save Bond embarrassment and helped to put him on the map politically. Afterwards, Larner wrote a book, Nobody Knows, about his travels with the McCarthy campaign, and most of it was serialized in Harper's Magazine in April and May of '69. This book got good reviews and was widely read by many who participated in the campaign and wondered what happened to McCarthy after the assassination of Robert Kennedy. In a wide-ranging interview given in 2016, Larner spoke about his experiences writing for McCarthy and how that influenced his script for The Candidate. Quote, "I thought a campaign was like drifting downriver on a raft, where everything is beautiful. Then you begin to hear the roar of the falls up ahead, but it's too late. You go over the falls, you lose yourself, you become internally confused by the difference between yourself and who your public thinks you are. And it's a disarming, disassociative experience. And Redford played that very well. The better McKay gets at campaigning, the more he loses himself." Yes, yeah. Larner continued his work with the peace movement in 1969. During the moratorium, which mobilized hundreds of thousands of people around the country, he wrote speeches for Sam Brown, the chief organizer and spokesperson of the moratorium, and also for Paul Newman, of all people, who gave a statement on behalf of several actors who were advocating that war protesters miss a day of work. During this time and afterwards, Larner spoke at many college campuses, first on behalf of the anti-Vietnam War movement, later on movies and politics. He has spoken at 100 universities around the country. In April of '71, he wrote a documentary-style script for the feature film The Candidate, which holds a 95% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Some politicians like Dan Quayle did not seem to realize the movie was ironic. Quayle spoke frequently about how the movie had inspired him, causing Larner during the 1988 elections to write an op-ed for the New York Times saying, "Mr. Quayle, this was not a how-to movie. It was a watch-out movie. And you are what we should be watching out for." Boom! Boom! During this time, Larner occasionally wrote speeches for politicians like Bill Bradley when he gave his basic position on Israel, or stars like Robert Redford when he spoke in behalf of environmentalism. In 1987, Larner began to write poetry, and in 1989 began to have public readings. In 1992, he wrote a long story titled Rack's Rules, the only piece of fiction in an anthology titled Sex, Death, and God in Los Angeles. After losing his home in the 1991 Oakland Hills fire, he contributed an article to Fire in the Hills, a compilation of responses to the fire, and became a regular contributor to New Choices magazine. It was in New York that Larner was inspired to write Chicken on Church, both a mock epic and a love poem to the city, particularly to the neighborhood on the end of Manhattan Island, Whitman-esque but full of specific detail and classical allusions. He first wrote the poem in 1992 and has revised it frequently since then. Chicken on Church and selected other poems have recently been published by Big Rooster Press. He's now in retirement. He's born in 1937, so that means he is 85 now, and he now lives outside of San Francisco, continues to write poetry, finishing a Hollywood novel based on Rack's Rules, and making notes for his memoirs. Now, okay, the gentleman that we see on the screen right here on the left, the redhead, that is Kenneth Tobey. And we'll talk about Melvin Douglas here in a minute. I know we're already 1 hour, 22 minutes in, and we haven't talked about Melvin Douglas yet. But let's talk about Ken Tobey, or Kenneth Tobey. He's best known as the scientist in The Thing from Another World, 1951, the original Thing movie. But you know what? I must confess that my favorite Kenneth Tobey role, even though he's in it very, very briefly, is in Joe Dante's Inner Space, where basically Martin Short is talking to Dennis Quaid when he's inside a tiny pod in his body, and Martin Short is taking a leak at the urinal, and he's just basically talking to Dennis Quaid while looking at his penis. And so, he finishes up and he's about to finish up, his urine and everything. And Ken Tobey just walks by and he just says, "Play with it, pal, but don't talk to it." And then you hear Dennis Quaid like, "Who is that?" "Oh, nothing." And what follows after that is hilarious, because Martin Short actually for a minute thinks he's pissed Dennis Quaid down into the urinal. So it's a great double joke right there. I love that. But Kenneth Tobey, he also was did a number, mostly television. He mostly did television. He was in One Way Street, Love That Brute, Angel Face, Jet Pilot, and among other things. Oh, he was also a projectionist in Gremlins 2, The New Batch. He was also in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, Single White Female, Hellraiser Bloodline, where he played a hologram priest. I don't know what that's all about. And his very last movie was in 2005 called The Naked Monster, which was a ultra low budget science fiction and horror comedy film. The final project took 21 years to make. Oh, take that, Boyhood. Yeah. And was the final film for Kenneth Tobey, John Agar, Laurie Nelson, and Robert Clark. Huh. Oh, that's right. He was also in Gremlins. He played the mobile gas station attendant where the father gives him the smokeless ashtray. Yeah, he was in that as well. Okay. 1 hour and 25 minutes. 1 hour, 25 minutes into The Candidate. And we have approximately 25 minutes left to go. Now, let's talk about Melvin Douglas, who plays Robert Redford's father. And he's particularly wonderful in this movie. Born in 1901, passed in 1981 at the age of 80. Came to prominence in 1930s as a suave leading man, perhaps best typified by his performance in the romantic comedy Ninotchka with Greta Garbo. And if you remember, Ninotchka was directed by Ernst Lubitsch, and it had a script with a few names, including Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder. Yeah, classic film from the 1930s. And Melvin Douglas is even on the poster. He's even credited on the poster for that. But he later portrayed mature and fatherly characters, and he won 2 Academy Awards. He won an Oscar for HUD in 1963, directed by Martin Ritt and starring Paul Newman. And he also won an Oscar for Being There, and his Academy Award winning and he was also nominated for the 1970 film I Never Sang for My Father. He was one of 24 performers to win the Triple Crown of Acting. In the last few years of his life, Douglas appeared in films with supernatural stories involving ghosts, including The Changeling in 1980 and Ghost Story in 1981, which was his final completed film role. And he developed his acting skills in Shakespearean repertoire while in his teens with stock companies in Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. He served in the U.S. Army in World War I, established an outdoor theater in Chicago, had a long theater, film, and television career as a lead player, stretching from his 1930 Broadway role in Tonight or Never, opposite his future wife, Helen Gahagan, and until just before his death in 1981. Douglas shared top billing with Boris Karloff and Charles Laughton in James Whale's sardonic horror classic, The Old Dark House, in 1932. He was also the hero in the 1932 horror film The Vampire Bat and the sophisticated leading man in 1935 She Married Her Boss. He played opposite Joan Crawford in several films, most notably A Woman's Face, Are You As You Desire Me, Ninotchka, and her final film, Two-Faced Woman, in 1941. One of the most sympathetic roles that he had was as a belatedly attentive father in Captain's Courageous, 1937, which I believe Spencer Tracy either won or was nominated for an Oscar for that. No, he actually won. Spencer Tracy won the Oscar for Captain's Courageous in 1937. During World War II, Melvin Douglas served as director of the Arts Council in the Office of Civilian Defense, and then served in the U.S. Army, rising to the rank of major. According to his granddaughter, Ileana Douglas, who is still very much an actress, and I love her in Stir of Echoes. That's my favorite Ileana Douglas role. But it was in Burma when he first met his future being there co-star Peter Sellers, who was in the Royal Air Force during the war. He returned to play more mature roles in The Sea of Grass and Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House. In 1959, he made his musical debut playing Captain Boyle in the ill-fated Mark Blitzstein's musical Juno, based on Sean O'Casey's Juno and the Paycock. From November of 1952 to January of 53, he starred in the Dumont detective show Steve Randall, which then moved to CBS. In the summer of 53, he briefly hosted the Dumont game show Blind Date, and in the summer of 59, he hosted 11 original episodes of a CBS Western anthology television series called Frontier Justice, a production of Dick Powell's 4-Star Television. As he aged, Melvin Douglas took an older man and fatherly roles, especially in HUD, The Americanization of Emily, an episode of The Fugitive, I Never Sang for My Father, and The Candidate. He won his second Academy Award for his comedy drama Being There. However, Douglas confirmed in one of his final interviews that he refused to attend the Academy Awards ceremony because he could not bear competing against child actor Justin Henry for Kramer versus Kramer. Oh. In addition to his Oscars, Douglas won a Tony Award for his Broadway lead role in the 1960 The Best Man by Gore Vidal, and an Emmy for his 1967 role in Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. Oh. And his final completed screen appearance was in Ghost Story. He did not finish shooting all of his scenes for the film The Hot Touch, but the film had to be edited to compensate for Douglas's incomplete role. And he was married briefly to artist Rosalind Hightower, and he also, in 1939, married actress turned politician Helen Gahagan. They traveled to Europe that same year and were, quote, horrified by French and German anti-Semitism. As a result, they became outspoken anti-fascists. We could really use them right about now. His wife, Helen Gahagan, was a 3-term congresswoman, was later Richard Nixon's opponent for the United States Senate seat from California in 1950. Nixon accused Gahagan of being soft on communism because of her opposition to the House of Un-American Activities Committee. Nixon went so far to infamously call her pink right down to her underwear. It was Gahagan who popularized Nixon's epithet, Tricky Dick. So this movie came out right before the 1972 presidential campaign, where Nixon won. The couple hired architect Roland Coate to design a home for them in 1938. Douglas and Gahagan had 2 children, Peter and Mary Helen, and they remained married until Helen's death in 1980. And Melvin Douglas died a year later at the age of 80 due to cancer. But yeah, his first movie was Tonight or Never, 1931, and his last movie was Ghost Story in 1981. So he was on screen for approximately 50 years. He also played Benjamin Franklin in a Benjamin Franklin miniseries from 1974, which won 5 Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Limited Series. Okay. So 1 hour and 32 minutes. We are 1 hour and 32 minutes into The Candidate as Robert Redford is making his final lap on the campaign trail. Whoa, that was pretty close. That was pretty close to the bus right there. See, did I talk about pretty much everybody? I think I did. I think I pretty much covered everybody that was, yeah. Uh-huh. I think so. The character of Howard Klein, played by Alan Garfield, was based on a New York political advertising consultant, David Garth, who Jeremy Larner met during the making of the movie, an encounter he described as a, quote, big break. Redford was reunited with Natalie Wood, who made a cameo appearance as herself after she had semi-retired in 1970. The two had co-starred in the 1965 film Inside Daisy Clover, as well as the 1966 film This Property is Condemned. Now, New York Times reviewer Vincent Canby called the film, quote, one of the few good, truly funny American political comedies ever made, and commented that The Candidate is serious, but its tone is coldly comic, as if it had been put together by people who had given up hope. Yes, yeah, that sums it up perfectly as far as I'm concerned. Variety called it an excellent topical drama that was directed and paced superbly. The entire film often seems like a documentary special in the best sense of the word, and that goes back to what Eric was saying. I really admire Ritchie's direction here. The documentary style is effective. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, praised Redford for, quote, a winning performance. Charles Champlin of the Los Angeles Times wrote that Redford and Ritchie have teamed again to deliver what I think is nothing less than the best movie yet done about politics in coaxial America. It has a right now urgency that is strong and compelling. Roger Ebert later said Ritchie, quote, brought a sharply observant, almost documentary realism to the film. Among negative reviews, Gary Arnold of the Washington Post panned the film as a remarkably shallow, hypocritical attempt to satirize the American political process. The problem with the filmmakers is that their disillusion is neither honestly felt nor dramatically demonstrated and earned. On the contrary, it seems a merely professional pose, a phony mask of invulnerability and moral superiority. Penelope Gillette of The New Yorker called it a dire film with a crass script and found Redford's resemblance to a Kennedy brother, quote, merciless to watchers and unbelievably opportunistic on the part of the filmmakers. It is one of the most vulgar pieces of casting that I can remember. Robert Schepetta in Film Quarterly wrote that a serious flaw was that Redford does poorly with the central dramatic element in the film. The changeover from being a reluctant candidate to wanting to win so badly that he is willing to compromise himself. Redford never conveys any real desire to win. Richard Combs of the Monthly Film Bulletin wrote that, quote, little definition or sympathy is lent McKay, who remains as much a cipher in the film's mechanics as he does in the hands of the political movers, and little interest generated in the workings of a system that is only conjured up in a gallery of intermittently familiar names and faces. However, Christopher Knoll from filmcritic.com gave the movie 4.5 out of 5 stars, said that this satire on an American institution continues to gain relevance instead of lose it. Mm-hmm. Film holds a 88% review fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. The Candidate may not get all the details right when it comes to modern campaigning, but it captures political absurdity perfectly and boasts typically stellar work from Robert Redford to boot. Yeah, this is definitely one of the best Robert Redford performances I've definitely seen. And not only did it win screenplay for best original screenplay, it won the Oscar for best original screenplay, but it was also nominated for best sound. Richard Portman and Gene Cantamessa. Yep. Now, let me see real quick. There's one more thing I wanted to look at here. As we are winding down here, we got 13 minutes left to go. 1 hour, 37, 30 seconds into the candidate. It was released a month prior to the 1972 California presidential primary. Promotional sheets were put up in Southern California resembling political posters. They had simply a photo of Robert Redford with the slogan, McKay, the better way. McKay got write-in votes in the June election. Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. Yeah, I'll vote for that guy. I'll vote for the guy that looks like Robert Redford. Robert Redford originated the project and personally hired Michael Ritchie to direct it, as he had worked as a technical advisor on various political campaigns. The role of Senator Crocker Jarman was originally offered to James Stewart, who turned the part down because he felt it was derogatory towards conservative politicians. Robert Redford and Michael Ritchie had recently worked together on Downhill Racer. When they approached Jeremy Larner together wanting to make a movie about a candidate who sold his soul, according to Larner, Warner's would not have financed the film were not Redford willing to take responsibility for it. And though he did not want the credit, he was a most conscientious producer from beginning to end. And the movie certainly reflects his personality. A prop campaign button from this film is on display at the Smithsonian Museum of American History. It's on display with several authentic campaign buttons. It was one of a handful of 1972 Warner Brothers releases to feature a rare, short-lived version of the Warner Brothers Shield logo with a solid blue background and a Warner Communications Company tagline. Deliverance was the only other high-profile WB movie to use that logo. Even though he won the Oscar for the screenplay, he never wrote another script. Jeremy Larner never wrote another script. Photographer Stanley Tretick, best known for his iconic photos of John F. Kennedy with his children in the Oval Office, appears in the chaotic scenes as McKay reaches his victory as part of the throng crushing around him. Tretick shot promotional stills for this and other Robert Redford films. Let's see. So we have just under 10 minutes left to go. Under 10 minutes left to go. Hour and 40 minutes, 30 seconds in. Now, this ending, which I wasn't expecting, by the way, this ending is, of course, deeply ironic. And, when he realizes he just sold his soul, it's like, what do we do now? Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep. All over the state, we understand, and here at McKay headquarters, there's frantic concern among the voters. Very frantic concern, yeah. Hundreds of volunteers are going to knock on the doors. So, and this film wasn't a big hit necessarily, though. It didn't make Warner Brothers a lot of money. But like I said, it got largely good reviews. The public seemed to like it. And here again, I mean, there's that cynicism, there's that satire, there's that cynicism, which totally appealed to somebody like me, even though I'm apolitical. I still recognize that there was like this sentiment that this whole thing is a charade. It's all a game, it's all a show. It's not really helping the country in any way. And it's going to be a great day for America. Yeah. I mean, they all say the same crap. I mean, it's almost like they're given a It's almost like every politician is given almost the same script, and just talk about the working man, talk about what you're going to do to help the working man. And no, where's my check? Where's my donor check? Oh, thank you, yeah. Look, I can't help but be that cynical about politics and about this system. It just, I I just don't get the point of it all. I just don't get the point. Here again, one more time, I have to ask the same question. Why vote for somebody when they don't give a shit about you? I think it's a perfectly valid question. I think it's an absolutely valid question. Can you explain to us the technique you use, Dr. Dwight? Well, we picked the key precincts in Los Angeles County, and we interview the voters on the way from the polls. 8%? What kind of shit is this? Doesn't change their minds. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to end on one more review written by Richard Winters, who gave the candidate an 8 out of 10. In commemoration of Election Day and the fact that all the campaigning and political punditry will finally be coming to a merciful end, we present a rare Tuesday post here. Although done 40 years ago, this wiry look at the inner workings of the political campaign trail is as incisive and timely as ever and hasn't lost any of its punch. Yeah. The story deals with Bill McKay, a young lawyer from California, who was persuaded to run for Senate against the incumbent Crocker Jarman. McKay represents the youthful idealism, while Crocker is very entrenched with the establishment. The film was directed by Michael Ritchie, who may not be a household name, but he is the creator of his own genre. He took the examination of competition and how embedded it is in American culture to new heights. Though his various movies, he showed how it infiltrates every aspect of our society, and no one is immune from it. From Smile to Bad News Bears and Downhill Racer, he showed how even the most unlikely of individuals can become fiercely competitive when driven. He also made his characters strangely endearing, no matter how sordid or ugly the competition made them become. The film works along those same lines, only it shows from a political perspective. It is smart, fast, cynical, funny, dramatic, revealing, and entertaining all at the same time. It's still timely and cutting edge and works almost like a documentary. The quick editing creates a seamless style. The film makes interesting observations without taking away from the flow of the story. In fact, one of the reasons it is so captivating is because it's downright educational. When the film is over, you feel much wiser to the business of politics and as exhausted as the candidate himself. Redford is terrific. Terrific. He has a real gift for underplaying everything to the point that it looks like he isn't even acting at all. He plays off his pretty boy looks, but doesn't stay trapped to a heroic image. He harbors a lot of idealistic traits one would want in a candidate, and yet he is still quite human. There are some definite shades of John F. Kennedy here. He has a troubled marriage and is even caught fooling around with an admiring female supporter. Although he has honorable ideas, he is far from having all the answers. Probably the most interesting insight of this movie is the fact that he ends up getting as sucked into the mechanics and compromises of the political machine as his old school foe. It perfectly illustrates how immense and encompassing the political machine is and how no one is really going to change it. This is an excellent and well-crafted picture that not only hits the bullseye, but does it many times over. I love Redford's final line, and Boyle, as his campaign manager, has never been better. The candidate would make my top 10 for political movies. You know what? I would agree. I think, yeah, All the President's Men, Bulworth. I also really like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I would put all those in, yeah, and The Candidate. I would put all those in my top political movies. Yeah, I would. I mean, Swing Vote with Kevin Costner wasn't really bad, but that's the thing. I'm trying to think real quick. I mean, I listed about 5 or 6 that I would put in my top 10, but MASH. Yeah, I suppose I would put MASH up there too. 13 Days with Kevin Costner about the Cuban Missile Crisis. That one's very good. The Manchurian Candidate. Yep, the Manchurian Candidate has to be in there. It has to be in there. Dick. Yeah, Dick with Michelle Williams and Kirsten Dunst. Yeah. And yeah. Well, Dave is all right. Yeah. Dave is okay too. And John Carpenter's They Live. Yeah, exactly. And here we have the final scene of The Candidate. You got to get out there. I told you they'd be here. They're coming for you. What do we do now? Wait a minute. What? How do we do no? And that's it. You know, everybody comes in to congratulate Robert Redford. And that's the end of the movie. Yep. His soul just got sold to the political machine. And it's just going to be like any other, 4-year term. Or actually 6-year term since he's a senator. But yeah. And I love this long final shot of the hotel room. The marching band plays outside, and that's it. Captioned by Warner Brothers, the National Captioning Institute. Here we have our cast. Yep. Yeah, I can't believe I confused Jeremy Lerner with Michael Lerner. I thought they were one and the same, but apparently they're different. I don't think, yeah. Groucho Marx's name does not appear in this, but here's all the credits: Lyrics to a Better Way and Just a Friend by David Koloff. Mm-hmm. So, at any rate, I'd like to, before I go, I'd like to tell you all about my upcoming commentaries. On Friday morning, which is Veterans Day, we're going to do a commentary on the ultra rare movie FTA, starring Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda, which was basically a response to the USO shows with Bob Hope during the Vietnam War, where Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda would go to all these, towns in Southeast Asia and have these musical review shows with comedy and sketches and that kind of thing. And who would come to all those shows but the GIs, who were absolutely disillusioned and disgruntled by the political situation and with the Vietnam situation and everything. Very important piece of military history. And on top of all that, I am going to make a plea to my fellow veterans to forgive Jane Fonda over the Hanoi incident. So that will be Friday morning at 1 a.m. And then on Saturday night, we will be doing Heroes, which is one of my favorite movies about veterans with Henry Winkler, Sally Field, and Harrison Ford. Yeah. And then finally on Sunday night, we are going to be doing a movie called Purple Hearts, our next Ladd Company commentary with Ken Wall and Cheryl Ladd. And yes, being there, also Melvin Douglas. Yeah, so I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Eric, Cliff, MLB fan, Ben Grimm, and Cliff Booth. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and listening to this commentary. I know I was incendiary a few times. I said I was, and look, I said everything I wanted to say about politics and the system in general. So maybe I'll talk more about politics next year. But otherwise, the rest of the next 2 years, not even going to think about it. Not even going to think about it. So at any rate, you all have a great evening, and thank you so much for coming. Have a good night.